Welcome to a panel presentation and discussion regarding updating standards and processes for accrediting counselor education programs in Canada. I'm Bill Borgen. I'm a professor of counseling psychology at the University of British Columbia and a past president of CCPA. I've been co-chair of CACEP since 2003 and will act as moderator for the panel. We'll begin with some background information that will provide a context for what is to follow. In terms of the beginnings of CACEP, after extensive consultation with counselor educators across Canada and with the endorsement of the then Canadian Counselling Association, the Council for Accreditation of Counselor Education Programs in Canada, or CACEP, was initiated in 2003. Since that time, standards and processes of CACEP have provided a benchmark for programs seeking accreditation and those that are making changes to their programs. In recognition of the changes that have occurred to counseling and counselor education since CACEP began its work, CCPA created a CACEP advisory committee with a mandate to rejuvenate current accreditation processes and standards. Panel members include members of the advisory committee and a member of a program that has been accredited. They will discuss some of the issues that the advisory committee is considering, including national consultations that have occurred regarding entry-level counselor competencies, standards related to the regulation of counseling across Canada, and the increase in for-profit counselor education programs in the country. The panel will also provide an update regarding progress in considering changes to current accreditation standards and procedures. Following each panel member's presentation, I will ask them questions similar to those asked when the panel made a presentation at the CCPA conference in St. John's, Newfoundland in May of 2017. The first presentation will be by Dr. Sharon Robertson. Dr. Robertson is a professor of counseling psychology at the University of Calgary. She's a past president of CCPA and has been co-chair of CACEP since 2003. Sharon will provide an overview of current accreditation standards and processes. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Bill. As Bill has indicated, the CCPA Council on Accreditation of Counselor Education Programs, CACEP, was formed in 2003. Its mandate is to accredit master's level counselor education programs in Canada. A history of the development of CCPA accreditation can be found in the July 2016 issue of the Canadian Journal of Counseling and Psychotherapy. So what is program accreditation? It is the recognition of quality assurance indicating that a program has met or exceeds predetermined standards set by a relevant professional body and has been granted approval. It implies the setting of minimal standards which training programs must meet. It's commonly used in other professions such as psychology, social work, medicine, nursing, and engineering, and in other countries it's used in counselor education as well. In this presentation, I will provide a brief overview of the existing CACEP accreditation standards and procedures. It is an entirely voluntary process. A manual containing the full standards and procedures, as well as a reference to the article on the history of CCPA accreditation, can be found on the CCPA website under the accreditation section. So what is typically included in accreditation standards? Usually, there are standards set in 8 areas pertaining to the institution in which the program is located, the mission and objectives of the program of studies, our curriculum, students, faculty, program governance, instructional support, and evaluation. CACEP has set standards in each of these areas for master's programs in Canada. I'll briefly go over these first and follow up with more extensive information on the program of studies. First, the institution. Standards pertaining to the institution require that the program must be located within an accredited Canadian university, that it must be recognized as part of the Faculty of Graduate Studies within the institution, that there must be cooperation with community-based resources, for example, for practicum placements, and it must have sufficient financial support from the institution to support the ongoing operation of the program, and that the institution must provide access to counseling services for students. The second standard is the mission, orientation, objectives, and priorities of the program. There must be a clearly defined published mission statement and that indicates the program's goals, orientation, objectives, and priorities, along with a description of the ways in which the program reviews and updates its mission. The objectives must be consistent with the mission, and in turn, program activities must be consistent with the objectives. The objectives must be written in such a way that it's possible to assess the extent to which they're being met. There's a specific set of criteria which the objectives must meet. The third standard, the program of studies or curriculum, has standards in four main areas: A, general standards; B, core concepts and competencies; C, elective concepts and competencies; and D, supervised practice. For now, I will cover the general standards and those pertaining to electives. Since core concepts and competencies and supervised practice are central to the program, I will come back to these areas more fully later. So, the general standards. There are 14 general standards. The main one for our purposes here is that the program must be comprised of a minimum of 48 credit hours of coursework, which may be completed on a full-time or part-time basis. Another important one is that the program must be fully established with an ongoing record of graduates for a minimum of 2 years. With respect to elective concepts and competencies, the program must offer elective coursework to allow students to focus on at least one area of special interest, such as school counseling or counseling in higher education, or community agency counseling, or rehab counseling, or career counseling, or family counseling. In terms of the students, it's the fourth area. There are four main standards pertaining to students. These relate to policies and procedures pertaining to the screening, selection, and advisement of students, student advisement, review of students' performance as they progress through the program, and the provision of program information to both prospective and current students. The fifth standard relates to faculty. These standards pertain to the quality and workload of faculty members. At minimum, there must be 3 full-time core faculty members who are responsible for the leadership of the program and its curriculum. Core faculty members must have an earned doctorate in counseling experience, and be qualified to and engage in research and supervision in counseling. There are also standards for additional faculty involved in the program. The sixth standard, program governance, pertains to the administration of the program. The seventh standard, instructional support, pertains to areas such as administrative support, office space for faculty and students, laboratory and practicum spaces, facilities and equipment, technical assistance, test materials and library resources, and financial assistance for graduate students. The last area is evaluation. This standard pertains to the ongoing review of the program, the objectives, policies, procedures, and outcomes, the annual review of student progress, and if accredited, the provision of a yearly report to CACEP, as well as a 3-year review and report to CACEP. Now back to Standard 3, the program of studies, core concepts and competencies. As mentioned previously, the program must be comprised of 48 credit hours. Within that, the core concepts and competencies that must be covered are professional orientation, ethical and legal issues, counseling theories, helping relationships such as development of a therapeutic alliance, individual counseling, including counseling interventions and consultation, group counseling, human development and learning, diversity, lifestyle and career development, assessment processes, research methods, program evaluation, practicum. And the practicum is must be comprised of 500 hours with 250 hours of direct client contact. So that's a very comprehensive list of areas that must be covered. To further clarify the standards with respect to practicum, there are two practica, an initial practicum and a final practicum. For the initial practicum, the number of hours required is 100. These hours must be supervised, and there must be 50 hours of individual counseling with 50 hours of client contact, with 40 hours of individual counseling and 10 hours of group counseling. The remaining 50 hours are spent in activities such as orientation to the site, report writing, case management, clinical supervision, videotape review, and so on. The final practicum requires 400 hours of supervised practice with 200 hours of direct client contact. Of these 200 hours, 100 hours must be spent in individual counseling and 40 hours in group counseling. Again, the remaining 200 hours are spent in activities such as orientation to the site, report writing, case management, clinical supervision, videotape review, etc. Across both practicum, then, total direct contact hours are 250, total practicum hours required are 500. So those are all the standards. I would encourage you to look them up on the CACEP, in the CACEP accreditation manual on the CCPA website, accreditation section. Now you might ask, what steps are involved in getting your program accredited? For that, I will briefly turn to the accreditation procedures, which are also available in the accreditation manual on the CCPA website. I will only briefly mention these as my colleagues, Ron and Blythe, will flesh these out more in their presentations. So first, you must engage in self-study. Review your program against the CACEP standards. Next, seek support from the administration in your university and approval to go forward. Next, review your program to meet the standards and develop an application. Fourth, invite a consultant who is knowledgeable about CACEP accreditation to review your program. Fifth, revise your program based on the consultant's feedback. Sixth, when ready, submit your application to CACEP. Seventh, CACEP will conduct an initial review of your application, and if appropriate, will authorize an on-site visit and set up the site visit team. Eighth, the site visit team will visit your program and submit a report to CACEP. Ninth, CACEP will forward the report to the president of your university, your dean, department head, and program coordinator. 10th, the university has 30 days to respond to the report. Next, CACEP will review the application and make a decision regarding accreditation. It may award full accreditation for 6 years, provisional accreditation for 3 years, or it may deny accreditation. Finally, if accredited, there is yearly monitoring by CACEP. So that's all of the things involved in both the standards for CACEP accreditation and the procedures for obtaining it.
Thank you, Sharon. Our next presenter is Dr. Ron Lair. Dr. Lair coordinates a CACEP accredited counseling program at Acadia University in Nova Scotia. He is a past president of CCPA and a former executive council member of the International Association for Counseling. Ron's presentation will focus on the processes of applying for and maintaining accreditation. Over to you, Ron.
Great. Thank you very much, Bill. And thank you, Sharon, as well. Yes, my presentation is an overview of the application procedure as it is perceived at the university level, the work that's involved, the cooperation of people, the dealing with issues that have arisen that we were unaware of, and so on and so forth. What I would like to do in this presentation is talk a little bit about the timeline that we engaged in, and to give you a few ideas of what we did in order to kind of meet the competencies, the core competencies that Sharon just previously talked about. And our procedure was pretty much along the same lines as she outlined. We followed the procedure as outlined by CACEP very, very closely. And I'll add up front that this was very, very helpful for us in the process that we engaged in. Sharon mentioned 2003, and it was in 2003 that we decided here at Acadia University to engage in the accreditation process. We thought it would be good for a very small university like Acadia with a very large counseling program to go through the process of accreditation. And I did this along with my colleague John Sumera back in 2003, and various faculty came on board as we went through the process. When we began, we had 42 credit hours in our program. We needed 48 credit hours, which basically meant adding 2 more courses to what we considered to be already a very expensive program. Yet we were committed to doing this, and so that was something that we had to give a lot of conversation to, how whether or not we could increase the credit hours to 48, and what would be the implications for the kind of program that we have. So the first step that we did was, and as Sharon as well mentioned, we needed the support of the university administration, and we needed the support of faculty. And we are located within a school of education as opposed to a faculty. So we are in the faculty of professional studies, but our core group would be the School of Education. So we needed to get the support of the director of the School of Education, and we needed to get the support of the Dean of Education, and we needed to get the support of faculty who were teaching within the School of Education. So that was the first step that we engaged in. And what happened in 2003, 2004, we did secure the support that we felt that we needed, with the proviso, and I quote, "as long as you can do it with no extra resources." And I believe that that probably would resonate with a lot of university programs, where universities are clear about the resources that they put to various academic units. So we felt we could do it without any extra resources. So once we were given the green light to move forward, we decided, and in line with the CACEP standards or procedures, we decided to engage in a self-study uh, as a means of completing our first application. In doing the self-study, we had to really do an overhaul of the program, and we had to look at what we currently were teaching in our program and how to convert that into, I guess, to a way where we had to articulate the competencies, and we had to articulate how those competencies were going to be covered in the various courses in the program. And in a 48 credit hour program, that's in 16 courses, and various faculty would be involved in helping in that process because different faculty members teach the various programs. And we were also very cognizant of the academic freedom issue within universities, where faculty members can exercise academic freedom in terms of the coverage in their various courses. But we had full support of the faculty, and they were willing to go with us. So we completed the self-study, and that was, I think, in 2003, 2004. We did not have a community advisory committee at the time, and the community advisory committee is constituted by the various stakeholders within the community at large. And the community at large here in Nova Scotia means people who are throughout the province. They would be the guidance consultant for the province. They would include counselors in colleges, counselors in schools, counselors in private practice, and various organizations who would have a stake in graduates from our program. So we created the Community Advisory Council, and we began having meetings prior to the application because, as Sharon previously mentioned, the program had to be up and running for 2 years prior to the application date. And so we began in 2003 in order to begin to implement a program that uh, prove was running for at least 2 years. So when we looked at the changing the 42 credit hours to 48, one of the things that we did not have in the program, and I think that this would resonate with a lot of counselor educators and students alike, we did not have a dedicated ethics course. Back at that time, the ethics was infused, and certainly we could articulate how it was infused within the program, but that probably wasn't enough, and we know it wasn't enough even at that time. So we created an ethics course, and we currently have that ethics course, and it's a regular part of the counseling program that students take prior to going out into their practicum. The other course that we added was a pre-practicum. We did not have a pre-practicum, wherein which you have to have 40 hours committed to counseling lab work with students. Even though some of this work was covered in other courses, we created a pre-practicum that students now are engaged in and have been since back in 2004. We had to change course titles to bring them up to date to what was current, and which also reflected the standards of CACEP. For example, vocational development was changed to work and life planning. Current issues in educational psychology was changed to human development and learning. And those are just to mention a few. The biggest challenge, and Sharon mentioned this, was the changing of the practicum to a total of 500 hours, 100 hours at the beginning where they're supervised with 50 contact hours, and then the remaining 400 for another 200 hours. So that was a big challenge. The biggest challenge that we had was trying to fit it within the constraints of the timeline of our program. But mostly it was dealing how would this be acceptable to people who were currently supervising our students. So we had to meet with the various stakeholders at school boards. We met with people in various counseling agencies, and we began that process of bringing them on board. And at this time, 2017, so this was like 14 years ago, 13, 14 years ago, I can say that, it's quite acceptable within the community that we have this intensive practicum. But that was a very difficult time. It was also difficult for students because they now needed to take more time away from work without pay in order to complete this part of their program. So that was a big step for us. Um, in the During the self-study, in terms of all of the other things, we decided that we wanted to have an external consultant. We went through the whole process of articulating the program, looking at all of the courses, matching the competencies up with the CACEP standards, creating a matrix of competencies so that we could tell where all of them were covered in all of the courses and how they were evaluated or covered within in the courses. And then we invited Dr. Glenn Shepard to come to Acadia from Memorial University to review our program prior to our application for accreditation. And I will say, and I've said before, that probably the most important step in this whole process was to have an external consultant, somebody who could come into our program with a fresh perspective, a different set of eyes, to be able to look at our program and to be able to point out what we were doing and what we needed to be doing. So that was a very valuable process. After that, we had to respond to the report from the consultant, and we included both the response and the consultant's report in the final application to CACEP. I might add there that we had to make some significant changes to uh, our program with the external when the external came in, mainly because we were looking at it with a very traditional set of eyes and not with the kind of eyes that we needed to be looking at it through the CACEP standards. So the final when we did finally apply to the for accreditation, it was in October of 2007. So we decided in 2003. So it took us 4 years, approximately 3.5, 4 years, to implement a lot of the changes in order to meet the standards of CACEP. A lot of work had to be done. There were a lot of growing pains, but we were very committed to the goal of accreditation, and we persevered, and we applied in 2007, and that went to Sharon Robertson and Bill Borgen, co-chairs of CACEP, and they went through the application with a fine-tooth comb, and I might add, with a very fine-tooth comb. They were absolutely exceptional in their ability to be able to look at our program with yet another critical set of eyes and to give us feedback and reasons why we really needed to do some more work within the program, which we did, and we resubmitted in April of 2008. And rather than kind of going into any detail with that, in 2009, we had a site visit report. A site visitors, the site visitors kind of came to the program, and they talked to faculty, talked to us, looked at our program, talked to the president, vice president, academic, and all of the people who were stakeholders within the university, as well as students and graduates of our program. And we were initially given a probationary accreditation in the fall of 2010. So 7 years after the initial time, we were given the go-ahead. And basically what probationary accreditation meant, the council said, yes, we think that your program is eligible for accreditation, but you still have some work to do. And so over the next 4 years, we began the process of writing, making changes in our program, sending annual reports to CACEP, getting the feedback from the council, and again, very detailed, very, very valuable information. And we went through the process over that 4-year period to bring our program up to a more solid standard. In 2014, we received full accreditation, and that's for 6 years. So and that's where we currently are. The program, as a result of the accreditation, the annual reports basically tell us what we have to improve upon and to continue to work upon. And the biggest one that we've had to work on, being in a rural province and not being in a city, is the practicum. And so we have gone through a series of iterations of doing lots of different things to make sure that the site supervisors know that X number of hours are dedicated to supervision, uh, and that students have to have so many hours of contact. So we did all of that, and we have full accreditation. And my time is up, but I'm really happy that we have a fully accredited program. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Ron, very much. Our next presenter is Dr. Bryce Shepherd. Dr. Shepherd is a professor at the University of Lethbridge. She is a past president of CCPA and is co-editor of the first Canadian book on counselor supervision. Li's presentation will focus on her experience as a CACEP site visitor. Li?
Thank you very much, Bill. I'm going to discuss three aspects related to the site visit, the self-study document, and then I'm going to spend more time on the site visit itself, and then end with the writing of the report. And so I'm going to, before I get started, I want to talk about a little bit about why is accreditation important? And I'm talking from my own perspective as a site visitor, but also from my perspective as someone who's worked on a few programs already. So let me get started with that. Okay, the value for me is, I would say, the encouragement to regularly review your courses and your program as a whole. And whether you're going for accreditation or not, I think that's a really important aim. The structured review is so useful in looking at all the detailed aspects of your program that often you tend not to take the time to do. I also think that accreditation increases accountability and participation of the faculty. No faculty member can work in isolation or in silos. Accreditation sends a really strong message that you're part of a team, that you're part of a program. And I think this has already been mentioned, but it's worth repeating that accredited programs are more likely to receive the needed resources. And that is particularly true during these times when it's hard to get resources. The purpose of the site visit really is to validate the information presented in the application for accreditation. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. It's also important during the site visit to gain a very holistic understanding, as well as the details about those aspects of the counselor education program that cannot be evaluated fully from looking at documents that are submitted as part of the self-study. And also, I've found personally that when I've tried to review the program as presented on the website, quite a few questions emerge that I would want answered. So the site visit offers that opportunity to fill in the gaps. So who are the site visitors? Well, the site visiting team consists of 3 members, and they are appointed by the chairs of the Council on Accreditation. And typically, the site visit consists of 2 or 3 day review of the program, and the chair of the Council on Accreditation, that would be Bill or Sharon, is responsible for scheduling the site visit and sending materials pertaining to the procedures and regulations covering site visits to the designated individual at the institution. And also they appoint the site visiting team and they designate someone to be chair of the team. And then they're very helpful in providing the members of the team with the necessary instructions and documents, as well as support that you might need in carrying out a site visit. So what are the qualifications needed to be a member of the site visitor team? Well, you need to be a member of CCPA. You also need to be a recognized counselor educator for a program at the master's level at a Canadian institution. You'll be asked to submit a current CV and to complete some site visitor training sessions on CCPA accreditation procedures. And this is really important. And we just recently had site visitor training at the last CCPA conference in Newfoundland. An important aspect is not to be in a conflict of interest with the program under review, and of course, to be approved by the Council on Accreditation. You are, as a site visitor, a volunteer, and you don't receive an honorarium. You are compensated, however, for your travel and subsistence. So that's an important piece, and you'll be submitting your receipts. The total cost of the site visit really is the responsibility of the university applying for accreditation. I've already mentioned that there is a chair appointed by the council, and the chair has specific duties. These include planning the site visit with the designated institutional representative in advance of the visit. So this would be making sure that you have all the documents you need. Also saying to them, we would like to have some other documents available to us when we visit on site. Helping to develop the interview schedule or the schedule for the 2 days, and making sure that people are actually going to be on campus and available. For some of the things that, and I'll be talking about this again a bit later, but for instance, you might want to be interviewing supervisors. They won't likely be on campus, so you need to make sure that you have set up ability to actually talk with them. So that might be by phone, it might be by video conference. And as well as chair of the site visiting team, you'll want to assign duties to each of the visiting team members. So making sure that everybody has a role and that they're very clear as to what they're doing. I know when I've been chair of a visiting team, I've made sure that we've broken down some of the different parts of the site visitors report into manageable chunks. So somebody might be in charge of leading the interviews with students, and another might be in charge of leading the interviews with supervisors, for example. It's really important to meet, if possible, the night before the site visit, and to talk about what that process is going to look like over the next couple of days. I think one thing that I like to do is to ensure that the site visitors understand that the evenings are not free, that they can't go out and engage in social activities. The evenings are really important times. For one thing, it can be quite overwhelming, the amount of information that you receive. And as well, I find that you need to sit down and kind of process what you've learned throughout the day. What are the gaps still remaining? What further questions do you have that you want answered before you leave? Does that mean that you need to let the representative on campus know that you're going to be needing to ask further questions of a particular person or group? As well, I think that during this time in the evening, you can start to make some preliminary notes for writing the report. So an important part is being the chair of the site visiting team. Many different aspects, but that'll be clearer, I think, when we go through this presentation. So let's talk about the self-study part. This is a crucial documentation and needed prior to making the actual site visit. What you really need is a clear picture of the program. So this is typically laid out in a binder, which is part of the application process. It needs to be current. It needs to have links to the website so that you can be working back and forth between the self-study document and the website. It needs to very, very clearly map out the competencies and standards so that it's evident as to how that standard was met. That's often where many questions come up when we're meeting with at the institution itself. And an important piece, as I've already mentioned, is getting that meeting schedule put together. That needs to be sent out well in advance of the site visit to ensure that the appropriate people are available and so that you can do your planning and divvy up the responsibilities amongst the team. So here, the site visit schedule is quite intense. I'll give you some ideas of typically who you might interview. So typically you would interview perhaps the president or the designate. That could be the VP academic. It's really important to try and get that set up early on because they tend to be the busiest. So do request an interview. The Dean of Education or the Dean of the faculty in which the program is housed. This is important because this is where the budget is often controlled. And so you want to find out a lot of information about the resources available to the program. Sometimes it would be to the Dean of Graduate Study. Usually there's an associate dean responsible for the counseling program. It's really going to vary depending on your program. A department head, again, depending on the structure of the faculty that you're in. The program coordinator, which is a specific role for in CACEP. And so they are or that person is the one who really leads the program. So a very key person to interview. As well, the clinical coordinator. So this is the person who sets up and ensures that practica and internships are appropriate to meet the CACEP standards. Anyone that is in an administrative role that is connected with the program is worth interviewing. This could be the graduate program director, the director of online learning, if there is such a position, and if you're doing kind of a blended approach. Core faculty members, those tenure track or full-time sessional faculty members connected with the program. As well, try and get set up, and this again might take a bit of doing prior to the site visit. Any additional faculty members, they might be those faculty who teach in non-counseling courses. For instance, at my university, it might be somebody who's teaching the research course or someone who's teaching a course on evaluation of programs. So they're really an important piece too because they offer a slightly different perspective than core faculty. Adjunct faculty and affiliated faculty members should be included in the site visit schedule. These can be part-time sessionals, practicum, supervisors, for instance, also offer a different perspective. And that's what you want. You want to get a very holistic kind of a big picture perspective as well as the details. The advisory committee members, including employers. Ron mentioned this in his presentation. Again, they provide that, the community-based perspective. Students and former students, graduates of the program, offer different information, as do the support staff associated with the program. So you also want to, after all that, and you can see that there are a number of interviews that you need to do during your visit. And you can see why 2 days are required for the review at a minimum. In addition, you also want to actually go and physically visit a number of different parts of the university. For instance, the test library. You want to look at student study space. you want to look at computer and research facilities, clinic facilities, or and maybe even laboratory training facilities if they're available on campus, and practicum sites on and off campus where possible. So you can see there's a lot to do. As well, what you want to do is look at program documents that might not have been part of the self-study document. So meeting minutes, minutes of the advisory or community-based council. I like to look at projects and student thesis as well. The program coordinator should be available to answer your questions and provide assistance in obtaining any additional information and documents that you need. The site visiting team really needs to have time in that schedule to just have a bit of a rest, to be able to talk to each other about, okay, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I think we need to be asking over the next part of our schedule. These are the gaps. Be sure that the schedule then allows time to meet briefly throughout each day. Even if it's 10 minutes, that's enough time. And of course, I've already mentioned that a meeting should be held at the end of the site visit to consolidate your impressions, to identify requirements that need to be met, and to draft recommendations arising from the site visit. Before leaving the site, the chair and other site visiting team members discuss with appropriate officers and faculty their general impressions of the program. The purpose of that meeting, which is another important meeting, is to allow for verification and or to correct misinformation that you have, and to really thank the members of the faculty and admin for their openness, for the site, for allowing you to come and do the site visit. I have found that faculty members have worked really, really hard on this, and they need a really big clap and round of appreciation. And so the last part that I want to talk about is the site visit report. And again, building on what Sharon already presented, there are different parts of the standards. So the institution would be one part. The mission, orientation, objectives, and priorities would be a second part. Program of studies is quite a long part. Students, faculty, program governance, instructional support, and evaluation. And each section needs to be addressed in the report under its own heading. And the standards are partially met, or not met. And you include information on the strengths of that. Let's say we're talking about the institution. What are the strengths? What are the limitations? And what recommendation does the team have for action? Do note that the site visit report does not contain a recommendation regarding accreditation. That is left up to the CACEP committee to do. Now, after the report has been written, and there's various aspects to writing, or ways, I should say, to write the report, but definitely the chair is overseeing it. And typically what has happened for me is that everybody who's been a part of the team has contributed to the report. The copy of the report is then sent to the president of the applying institution, or his or her designate, the dean of the faculty, and the head of the administrative unit in which the counselor education program is located, and to the professional leader of the counselor education program for verification for the factual data and or for comment. The institution then has 1 month in which to respond by providing additional materials that are requested concerning the facts and conclusions in the written report. And so that is kind of in a nutshell what happens during a site visit, leading up to it, during the site visit, and how it finishes up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blythe. Our final presenter is Dr. Natasha Caverly. Dr. Caverly is the immediate past president of CCPA, and she chairs the CACEP Advisory Committee. Natasha will provide an overview of the work of the CACEP Advisory Committee. Natasha?
Thanks, Bill. Building upon the various discussion points that were put forward by Bill, Sharon, Ron, and Blythe, I wanted to take some opportunity to talk about the CACEP Rejuvenation Initiative that's currently underway by CCPA. So as background, back in 2013, 2015, the CCPA Board of Directors, and it was led by Blythe Shepherd at the time, we were really interested in making sure that any of the programs that were being administered and run by CCPA had due diligence and a level of oversight to them. So that created an opportunity for the governance committee to prepare a policy called the Oversight of Partnerships with External Committees of CCPA. So I wanted to share that as some background before I launch into talking about CACEP Rejuvenation, that with any of the programs that we are overseeing as a national board of directors, we wanted to make sure that there was uniformity in terms of professionalism, different types of standards and practices from a business perspective in terms of running those programs under a not-for-profit organization being CCPA. So that provided us with an opportunity as a national board of directors at the time to begin our continuous improvement and quality assurance of our various programs. Again, one of them being a very prominent one being CACEP. So that began our process of connecting individuals who were interested on the board of directors with CACEP and with the counselor educators chapter to come together to form a rejuvenation initiative committee. So basically, in the spirit of continuous improvement and quality assurance, there was recognition at the board level with the CACEP Council and with counselor educators of rejuvenating and revitalizing CACEP. Again, recognizing the current landscape that we are living in and working in Canada, particularly around regulation, and different counseling practices in a diversity of work settings. So how do we bring that all together to make sure that, again, CACEP is staying current and relevant now and in the future with regards to the accreditation of counselor education programs from a pan-Canadian perspective. So we wanted to make sure that we were looking at strategic directions of CACEP, the way it operates, the financial dimensions to it, and then the cross-cultural pieces as well. Moving forward, again, the CCPA National Board of Directors has and continues to be very supportive of CACEP as one of our more recognized programs with CCPA. So again, on behalf of the membership, we saw that value in terms of moving forward with continuous improvement, rejuvenation, and revitalization of this important program. So I mentioned that, again, it takes a team in terms of looking and having various subject matter expertise looking at rejuvenation. So we had a cross-section of individuals who have come together for the past couple of years, looking at some of the various dimensions of CACEP from this rejuvenation and revitalization perspective. So I did want to acknowledge Bill Borgen as CACEP co-chair, Jose Domine, who's with the Counselor Educator Chapter, John Driscoll, our incoming CCPA National President, our current, I should say, National President for 2017-2019, Barbara McCallum, CCPA Chief Executive Officer, Pam Patterson with the Counselor Educator Chapter, Sharon Robertson as CACEP co-chair, and Blythe Shepherd as our outgoing past president, and myself. It really takes a team to be moving this rejuvenation concept forward. And so again, I wanted to acknowledge the team effort that has been quite instrumental in looking at all dimensions and all facets of CACEP. So in terms of looking at rejuvenation and revitalization, what does that look like? How did we go about looking at various pieces and dimensions of this important program at a national level. What we decided to do, the team that I have just identified, is we wanted to do some data collection first. We really wanted to understand CACEP and understand the current counseling professional landscape in Canada. So that involved conducting a survey, an online survey of master's level counseling programs in Canada. This was our temperature check, a temperature check on the value that master's level counseling programs may or may not have around accreditation of the respective programs. And then what was the level of knowledge and understanding that master's level counseling programs had about CACEP itself. So again, before we kind of launched into looking at the standards, pulling them apart, and having those intensive discussions, we wanted to see again, was counselor education accreditation still of value? Was it still relevant given our current, again, regulatory and professional landscape in Canada? And I'm pleased to say that, again, the results were indicating that, yes, master's level counseling accreditation is still important and relevant more than ever. And then we got some pathways in terms of identifying where are some areas that we could enhance in terms of standards or people's understanding of the CACEP program itself. So once we, again, had that opportunity to do the online survey, that was our quantitative component to the work that we were doing from a data collection perspective. We also wanted to balance that with some qualitative interviews. So having an opportunity to connect with site visitors. So some of those individuals that Blythe had mentioned in her presentation, the individuals that go out and carry out those reviews on behalf of the CACEP Council about looking at and reviewing counselor education programs. We also wanted to interview accredited program leads or designates. So individuals such as what Ron had presented, organizations, programs that had actually gone through the accreditation process. What were their values and perspectives that they could share, again, in a confidential setting about what works and what areas could be enhanced related to CACEP now and in the future. So once we had that combination of qualitative and quantitative data, we can then move forward to the stage that we're at now, which is CACEP transformation. So we saw that immediately there was two areas that we wanted as a team to move forward on. One was building CACEP site visitor capacity. So again, you heard some comments, particularly in Blythe's presentation, where we want to build up, again, a pool of individuals that can be carrying out site visits at master's level counseling programs across Canada for those who have expressed interest. And in May 2017, there was an opportunity co-led by Bill Borgen and Sharon Robertson to have a pre-conference workshop in St. John's, Newfoundland. So again, that was a way to begin the process of galvanizing more individuals to be part of the site visitor complement for CACEP. So that is one area that we felt was very important, was again, building capacity of our current site visitor pool. The second area that we're currently working on is reviewing and revising the CACEP standards. So looking at and reflecting on some of the points that Sharon Robertson had mentioned in her presentation was there's 8 major standards that are comprised as part of CACEP. So we're deconstructing them, so to speak, our CACEP team in terms of looking at each of those standards. And we're doing that not only with our own respective subject matter expertise in each of those areas, but we also went through a fairly substantial cross-jurisdictional review of the literature. So we looked at over 40 documents with regards to entry to practice, competency profiles. We were looking at counselor education and related accreditation standards of graduate level programs. We also consulted some of our international colleagues as well. So in addition to any work or literature that we were looking at from a Canadian perspective, we wanted to reach out to some of our counterparts in the United States, one being Carol Bobby She is the lead champion for CACEP, that is the US equivalent to CACEP. There was also an opportunity for members of our team to connect with individuals with the Western Association for Counselor Education and Supervision. Again, that provides us with some interesting learnings about distance education, social justice, diversity, competencies, and how we can begin to integrate some of these emerging and current trends into the work that we're doing in terms of rejuvenating CACEP standards. And we also reached out and got information from our counterparts in Australia and New Zealand. So again, wanting to tailor what's happening at the regional levels or provincial territorial from a regulatory perspective, what's happening across Canada collectively, and what's happening from a counselor education accreditation perspective with our international colleagues. So we convened a meeting last month in terms of looking at the standards. And again, we wanted to go through that process of, again, what is the current literature indicating in terms of accreditation and some of those different core themes or competencies within our profession of counseling and psychotherapy. We wanted to make sure that there's, as best as possible, congruency or alignment with our current CCPA certification requirements. Also, the provincial regulatory landscape that you've heard me mention. Just as a sidebar, at present, we have Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and now New Brunswick that are regulated provinces for the counseling psychotherapy profession. And then some of the remaining provinces are in various states of discussion with their provincial health institutions in terms of looking at ways to, again, regulate the counseling psychotherapy profession. So again, it was important for us to keep up with the trends that are happening at those tables as well. So with that and our consultations, that's the stage that we're at right now in terms of reviewing each of those 8 standards that Sharon had articulated. Again, building upon the data that we received from our online survey, the qualitative interviews of site visitors and accredited programs, and then our extensive consultation in terms of literature reviews and outreach to our international colleagues about what's happening around the state of counselor education accreditation from that global and national perspective. So what brings us all together in terms of looking at this rejuvenation and revitalization is a commitment from the National Board of Directors for CCPA that we really want to invest in CACEP. And and I'll just summarize, and many of the points have been mentioned by my colleagues in their presentations, but I wanted to reinforce them. When we talk about investing in CACEP, the National Board of Directors is really keen on supporting quality assurance of master's level counselor education programs in Canada. So ensuring that, again, consistency of practices, particularly for individuals entering into the field of mental health. We also want to support different organizations or post-secondary institutions in terms of making that business case for counselor education from that pan-Canadian perspective. We also wanted to recognize that by updating the CACEP standards, we're recognizing again the diverse counselor education programs and delivery methods. So again, we recognize from the time that counselor for CACEP was in existence, we're moving towards, in addition to any traditional classroom settings, some different modalities. And we also wanted to reflect, as I've mentioned before, current and emerging core concepts and competencies that are emerging and need to be integrated in terms of being a professional, timely, relevant, and ethical counselor in our specific work settings. We also want to help to position counselor education accreditation in this changing regulatory landscape. Again, we have 4 provinces now that are regulated, and we anticipate more coming down in the future years. So again, making sure that there's those congruencies between our standards of practice, if you will, looking at our CACEP standards and also looking at the regulatory requirements for each of the respective provinces and territories in Canada. And finally, we want to recognize the need to market CACEP. Again, knowing that there's an urgent need for counselors and psychotherapists across Canada, looking at various mental health needs, it's important for us to, again, set the standards in terms of individuals, what is needed core competency-wise, to be professional, competent, and ethical counselors in Canadian society. So that's a brief recap in terms of where we're at around the counselor education work that we're doing, but specifically our rejuvenation activities in a team-based perspective. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Natasha. I'd like to thank all of the panel members for your presentations. We will now proceed with questions for each panel member, beginning with Sharon. Sharon, first question. What are some of the ways programs meet core concepts and competencies in the program of studies?
Well, that's a good question. It often comes up as to whether or not each core concept and competency, a set of competencies, needs to be different through a separate course. The answer is some, but not necessarily all, need to be covered in standalone courses. For example, ethics needs to be covered in its own course, but should also be infused throughout the program, especially in the practicum courses, in order to foster transfer of knowledge to practical situations. Ron spoke to that in terms of his own program. Another example is that there's a requirement that essential interviewing and counseling skills be taught in a pre-practicum course, which involves at least 40 hours of laboratory practice in basic counseling and simulated interviews. And Ron spoke about that as well. This is also normally offered as a standalone course. Another consideration is that CCPA requires that to be certified by the association, individuals must present with completed standalone graduate coursework in the core areas of counseling theories, counseling and communication skills, professional ethics, and supervised counseling practicum. So programs need to be thinking about that in order to ensure that their students are qualified for certification. Applicants must also, for CCPA certification, must also present with standalone elective coursework in 4 additional areas, some of which are assessment processes, counseling intervention strategies, diversity issues, group counseling, human development and learning, career development, and research and evaluation. All of the areas I've mentioned above are required within the CACEP standards. So it behooves the program to examine the CACEP certification standards in deciding what to offer in a standalone course and what to infuse. The benefit of having core concepts covered in separate courses is that it makes it easy to identify where and how much of each core concept or competency is covered. It's far more difficult to do that when core concepts are infused in various courses across the program. When this is done, the onus is on the program to clearly identify where and how much is covered. The area of diversity is one which is sometimes required as a standalone course, sometimes infused, and sometimes both. It's one that's gaining increasing prominence, and there is the issue of how do you make sure that students are really having this area covered across their curriculum. So that is about it. There's not an exact answer, but that may give you some idea about the kinds of things that are done.
Thanks, Sharon. Second question, what are some of the specific standards related to practica?
Well, as I mentioned before, there are 2 required practicum. There are a number of standards for these beyond those I've mentioned. Some of the main ones are a critical aspect of the 100-hour initial practicum is that faculty members provide the supervision of students in the practicum in order to help the students transfer their knowledge and skills that they've learned in the program and counseling real clients. students must receive an average of 1 hour per week of individual supervision and 1.5 hours per week of group supervision by a faculty member. And that's something that programs often are surprised by, but they work it out. One faculty member may provide supervision to no more than the 5 students in the practicum, which means that group supervision is to be offered in groups of no more than 5 students per faculty supervisor. So that's one example. And Ron spoke about that in the development of his program. He also spoke about the second 400-hour practicum, where students are placed in field settings with external supervisors. So there, students must receive regularly scheduled individual supervision by their site supervisor. They also must receive group supervision. Site supervisors must have at minimum a master's degree in counseling and 4 years of relevant counseling experience. And that is something that's important because it's also required for certification, CCPA certification. In both of these practicums, use of a variety of supervision methods, including direct observation, review of video recordings, and peer feedback is required. And finally, another aspect is that student performance must be evaluated throughout the practicum, including a formal written evaluation at the end of the practicum.
Thanks, Sharon. Final question. What are the requirements regarding program governance?
Well, there are a number of requirements specific to program governance that Blythe alluded to some of them, but I'll just go over them. For example, there must be a program coordinator and a clinical coordinator, both of whom are core faculty members and are given appropriate release time to carry out these roles. And CACEP really advocates for these faculty members to receive that release time. There must be a program committee made up of counselor education program faculty, which meets regularly and is chaired by the program coordinator. And there also must be student representation on the appropriate committees of the counselor education program. So those are some aspects of program governance.
Thanks very much,
Thank
Sharon.
you.
Ron, over to you. Some questions for you with respect to your presentation.
Okay. Hi, Bill.
First one, what are your current challenges in maintaining an accredited program?
Good question. I've made note of probably 3 particular challenges that we have. The first one is because we're a small university, faculty workloads have increased as a result of accreditation. What happens is that people go on sabbaticals and they take leaves. They may take an educational leave or a sabbatical leave, or they have an exceptionally heavy teaching load. So the amount of work sometimes within an accredited program can be fall to one person. In a small program, we have the bare minimum of faculty, so we can't distribute it over a large number of faculty like a larger university could, where they may have 6 or 7 faculty members to take on the workload. However, that one is counterbalanced by the fact that we do have an incredible amount of support from faculty within the School of Education to help us with the accreditation needs. But workload is an issue for us, and we're continually working on it and building bridges with other faculties to help us. The other challenge that we have is the replacement of faculty through retirement. We recently had a senior faculty member retire, and so we had to go for a little more than a year without a tenure track faculty member to join us in the accredited program. We did hire somebody, and that was really appropriate for CACEP because it was a transition time. Uh, However, other retirements are on the horizon. So there is a challenge when we are competing with other programs to have new hires within the program, and we need that mainly because we meet the bare minimum standard of 3 faculty members. So that's one of the challenges that we have. It hasn't been too detrimental at this point, but down the road a little bit, we can anticipate that it's going to be a challenge again. Uh, the the other challenge that we have and that we are continually addressing is that we have a condensed program, and we really need to. It's a 14-month program, so we try to achieve this in 14 months, and we don't think that that's overly sustainable. It's a lot of stress on students, and it's a lot of stress on faculty. So consideration is now being given to moving this into a 2-year program in order to address the needs of an accredited program. We continue to keep committed to the accreditation, so that's a big issue. So the condensed program for us is a challenge. The other one, and probably one of the larger challenges that we have, is the practicum. I said earlier that we are in a rural province. Even Halifax is a rural area. I mean, we may have over 350,000 people there, but it is a small province, and people know people who know people. Uh, and the resources that we have for practicum, what we're finding is that it's becoming more and more of a challenge. Uh, the 500-hour requirement for the total practica it puts a big strain on site supervisors. So we may end up some years, as we did last year, where supervisors were saying, not this year, maybe next year, not this year, maybe next year, and or supervisors move from one site to another, so that particular site is gone. So it's a continually changing field for placements, but we are putting, I believe, a large strain on site supervisors, and this is both in our agency stream and in our school counseling stream. We're still able to do it in the school counseling. The agency stream gets a little bit more challenging, and so we're working on that with the person hired for to the clinical part of our program for site placements. But it is a full-time job to maintain those site supervisions. The the other thing within the practicum itself, we find the group counseling hours a challenge. When you have a program like this, and the requirements for group counseling can be challenging because some of the sites do not have a group counseling model, and we're not really located in an area where all of our students can pick up their group counseling hours to the tune of 50 hours. So we're continually working on it, and we've made incredible improvements. Sustaining that is a difficulty. The individual counseling hours, we have worked with site supervisors for many years, and so they now know what the expectations are for the contact hours. But so it's just the group hours that are a little challenging. The Sharon mentioned the requirements for site supervisors. I don't know if this is directly related, but I will put it in there. The requirements for CCPA certification and the requirements for CACEP are different on one particular point. The CCPA certification requires that the site supervisor belong to a counseling association that has a code of ethics and a complaints procedure. When you're working with school counseling, most provincial school counseling associations are provincial, and they are an arm or an interest group of the larger teachers union. So they might belong to their provincial association, such as in Nova Scotia, it's the Nova Scotia Teachers Union, but they do not have their own code of ethics. So this year, especially, we have had a lot of people who cannot be supervisors we've had in the past. We've lost because they are not members of CCPA. So that's because we're working on it. I've been talking to Kim Holohan at National Office, who is absolutely exceptional. Jeff Landine, I talked to last night. I've talked to other people about this. We're trying to come up with other solutions. One solution, for example, would be to try to get these associations to adopt the CCPA Code of Ethics, even though if you ask any counselor in the schools in Nova Scotia what Code of Ethics they follow the CCPA Code of Ethics. However, they may not be members of CCPA. So that is actually a huge challenge, and Natasha knows about that, and Blythe. I don't know how this affects other counseling programs across the country, but for an accredited program that requires our members to have this, it's one of the most present challenges that we have. So those are the main challenges. And despite the fact that there are challenges, we've had a lot of challenges in the last, 10 or 12 years. And rather than looking at them as obstacles that shouldn't be there, we're trying to work with other people to overcome them and to find creative solutions to it.
Thanks very much, Ron. Another question, what benefits have you experienced because of having an accredited program?
Thank you, Bill. Yeah. I think um, the benefit, one of the benefits to an accredited program is related to the fact that we have retirements. When we lost our senior faculty member, we didn't get anybody. We didn't get a tenure track position immediately to replace that person. However, because we are an accredited program, because the accreditation belongs to the university would be at risk of losing the accredited program if they did not give us to replace the person who left with a tenure track position. So even though the School of Education requires a math educator, social studies educator, they unanimously endorsed us getting a tenure track position because we were an accredited program. That's a huge thing. Within the university, being perceived as an accredited program elevates the status of your program, and universities want to keep programs that are accredited. And we just found out that firsthand by having the university give us that tenure track position. The quality of the program, no doubt. I've been teaching for just about 30 years in counselor education programs. We are making visible what we're doing by articulating the competencies and by articulating how they are covered and evaluated within the various courses within the program. So we're not just simply a credential-based program, we're a competency-based program. It's visible, students see it, the advisory people see it, the university sees it, and so it really elevates the quality of the program. I'm not saying that the programs that we had are not quality, of the ones that I taught in before, nor the ones who are not accredited, but it certainly makes more visible what we are doing within the program. And I do believe it really adds to the quality of what the students are getting um, there. And of course, I think by the very fact that we're on this webinar speaks to the standard of credibility for the profession across the country. Natasha talked quite a bit about that, and I think that everybody kind of, indicated that this was part of the reason why we're doing this. It does really add to the credibility of the profession. The profession itself is, not old, 45, 50 years. So we're continually trying to build credibility within other helping professions. And I think accreditation is really helping with that. Students, not just students, but employers are now recognizing the value. They will refer to our program as an accredited program. They want students who are graduating from accredited program. They seek advice from us because other people are applying to their agencies and their program is not accredited. What do we think? Of course, we don't criticize the other program and we speak positively about them, but they do recognize the importance of accreditation. Uh, I think within the School of Education here at Acadia, when I first came here, we were referred to as counselors, and I began telling people, no, we're not counselors, we're counselor educators. And so it's been a process of educating other faculty within the school and within the faculty that we are counselor educators. The accredited program has been really recognized that we now have counselor educators with an accredited program within the School of Education and within the Faculty of Professional Studies. So it really elevates the status of our program within the larger school and faculty. And we have the incredible, it really does foster the support of other faculty members to be helpful with our program. Um, uh, it, Students apply to our program from all over the world now. They want to come to Canada and they want an accredited program. So each year, I don't know, in larger universities, probably more, but on average now we get 120 applications for 20 positions, and that's very, very consistent with our program. And a lot of students speak to the fact that this is an accredited program. When they were looking for a program to come to, they wanted the accreditation was something that was very important to them. Um, I think I'll stop there, Bill. I think that, I think there are many other things like the how we tie into the colleges and regulation across the country, but I think that it's been a very positive experience overall.
Thanks for that, Ron. You, we have another question on the quality of the program, but I think you've already alluded to it. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
What's that question once more, Bill?
Just how has accreditation affected the quality of your program?
Yeah. I think I really have talked to that, and I would add one more thing that we have created a matrix of all of our courses and all of our competencies, and we have created templates with all of the competencies covered by each course. So there's a consistency for our standards and competencies, but it still allows an incredible breadth of academic freedom. Faculty members can still create their own courses, but they will cover our competencies because they have that template. It's really, it hasn't standardized the course, but it's really standardized the standards and competencies, so to speak.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Blythe, some questions for you.
Okay.
What types of questions do you ask faculty members in the interviews during a site visit?
Yeah, I tend to ask, first of all, what their role is in the program, what courses they're teaching, their teaching load, how many, is it are all the courses taught within the counseling program? Um, I ask them about their strengths and weaknesses, what they see as the strengths and weaknesses of the program in counseling. And then, how is that changing over time? So are there particular issues that you see facing the program? And Ron certainly talked about this. Retirement is a big one, or when people go on study leave. I also ask about the current faculty complement, any recommendations for replacements. What about resources and support within the faculty? So that they get an opportunity to really describe the program, perhaps in a different way than what's come across on paper. I asked them about release time. Uh, let's see. How are the decisions made about the program? What's the process used? I think that gets at a lot of kind of the underlying issues and the way the program actually functions. Um, I also ask about research productivity, as well as their involvement in thesis and project committees. So those are some of the main areas that I would question faculty about.
Thanks very much. You talked a little about in your presentation about the purpose of meeting with the dean of the faculty, and I didn't know if you had anything else to add to that.
Oh, well, I see the dean as offering some kind of upper level information that again might not have come across in their self-study documents. So I want to gain an understanding of the program's place in the university and in the faculty's strategic plan. What's the connection there? How does the program itself contribute to the mission of the faculty? And is the faculty overall satisfied with resources that are used in the program? I know in both places where I've taught counseling education is we've been part of a larger faculty, and so it often has seen that the counseling program is more demanding of the resources. So how is that going over in the faculty? I think that's an important one because when you go to advocate for more resources, are you going to meet with resistance, and how can we do some problem solving around that? So some of the things that I'm looking at in terms of resources are hiring, of course, but various kinds of support. It could be staff and administrative support. IT support is a really important one at the university where I am. And if we lost that, we would really have a very difficult time in offering our programs. Also, budgeting is a big one as well. And so what percentage is going towards the counseling program? So those are some of the things I would at least start off with.
Thanks, Blythe. Final question. Perhaps you could go over a little bit about the process of writing the report that results from the site visit.
Mm-hmm. Well, the process is really determined by the site visiting committee. The chair, of course, as I've already said, is in charge of ensuring that the report gets done in a very timely fashion. It's 4 weeks from the time of the site visit. So in both of the site visits that I took part in, each member of the team took a section of the report and wrote it. And then that was the initial kind of draft of it. And then I, as the chair, went through each of the sections and then added more to it or raised some questions. And then I contacted the team for further insights and contributions. We had all taken quite extensive notes throughout all the interviews and all the visits that we had on campus. And so we have a lot of notes to refer to written by different people with various perspectives offered. And so I wanted to be sure that that variety of perspectives and different information was incorporated into the report. So often people have different insights that they can bring. And particularly some of the sections really align with the research area or the area of teaching expertise. So really trying to grab that information from them. And so finally, I would then, as chair, I would make revisions to the report, send it back to the team once more for a quick turnaround, and then forward it to the chair of the council, you or Bill, or to you, Sharon.
Very much, Blythe. Hey, Natasha, a couple of questions for you from your presentation. Has the committee considered opening accreditation to non-Universities Canada counselor education programs?
Yes, we're definitely considering that particular opportunity, particularly given the fact that in April 2016, the CCPA National Board of Directors at the time had some discussions about certification and talking about inclusivity. So the wording now to that effect is rather than it being exclusively to Universities Canada, our wording now is a Canadian institution that is governmentally recognized as a degree granting institution. So tied in with that is the proviso that there is some type of third party organization, such as a provincial quality assurance council or related organization that provides that external oversight and assessment of a given institution. So definitely in the conversation points that I shared in my portion of the presentation, certification requirements become an important part of our deliberations as a CACEP rejuvenation team, ensuring that there are those congruencies between what's happening with certification requirements and how we're reviewing and revising the CACEP standards.
Very much. Final question. What are the proposed next steps with the CACEP Rejuvenation Initiative?
Sure. So our immediate next steps are finalizing our CACEP standards in terms of revising and reviewing them. And then another important dimension that our team is interested in is before it goes through our steps of the decision-making processes of the board of directors is to map out a stakeholder consultation process. So we're hoping to, again, have those discussions internally and then follow it up as to outreach to counselor educators, for example, in terms of testing our assumptions or validating, again, the information that we've put together internally as a CACEP team. What do people, again, within the field of counselor education in Canada think of, again, our proposed changes, our modifications to the CACEP standards? So again, stakeholder consultation is going to be key before we begin the approval processes that we have in place through our National Board of Directors. So stay tuned for those that will be viewing the webinar in terms of further information about that opportunity.
Thanks very much, Natasha. I'd like to thank all of the panel members for your presentations today and for your responses to the questions. Do you have any other further comments or questions at this point?
None from me.
No, I don't have any other questions.
I don't have any questions either.
None for me.
All right. Well, thank you for watching this presentation and discussion. As Sharon mentioned in her presentation, an article on the history of accreditation in Canada and the accreditation manual are both available on the accreditation section of the CCPA website. If you have any questions regarding accreditation, please contact Sharon or me. Sharon's email address is sroberts@ucalgary.ca, and mine is william.borgen@ubc.ca.